Well, we have two speakers tonight. The Reverend Nancy Vogele, who is an Episcopal priest and chaplain and the direct chaplain at Dartmouth University and the director of the William Jewett Tucker Center for Spiritual and Ethical Life. She has extensive experience as a college chaplain. She's also been a pastor in both Episcopal and Lutheran churches. So she's got a very broad background here. Also joining us is the Reverend Dr. Guy Collins. He's the rector of, I'm blinking out here. Here we go.
St. Thomas in
St.
Hanover.
Thomas in Hanover. I should know this by heart. He is also the Episcopal chaplain for Dartmouth College. He has an extensive background with a PhD from Cambridge University on philosophical theology, and he was ordained in the Church of England and then jumped the pond and ended up here. He has several books to his credit, including The Goldilocks God, Searching for the Via Media, as well as Faithful Doubt, The Wisdom of Uncertainty, which is perfect if you're talking to college students or pretty much anybody these days.
So we got Melinda coming in here. So we'll wait a second for her to connect, huh?
Yeah.
And then once
Melinda.
All right, I think we're all right. So good evening, everybody. Thank you for taking the time. As Lene said, I'm Nancy Vogele. Lene and I go way back, so it's a pleasure to do this with her and also with my colleague Guy Collins. I am Dartmouth College chaplain, but I also direct the Tucker Center, as Lene said, and part of the Tucker Center is the United Campus Ministries, and one of them is the Episcopal Campus Ministry, and Guy is the chaplain for that. So I asked him to join us tonight. And before we jump in, and I'll say something, Guy will say something, I might say something, but we'll leave plenty of room for discussion. I'm wondering, I get the sense that how many are in parishes near a college or university? So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right. And then Melinda, yes. All right, good. So I thought we'd probably be having people who are in both things. One, you have teens and they're going off to college and you want to launch them well, but also you are near a college or university and you want to know how you can do that ministry better. And it's precisely for that reason that I asked Guy to join us, because I think St. Thomas and Edgerton House, which is the Student Episcopal Center, does a great job. And don't get intimidated. You know, this is a robust operation, but the principles are important no matter what size or what resources or whatever. So one of the things Lene asked was how we can support college students, how we can prepare teens to take that leap in their faith as they're leaving the parish, you know, of their childhood and going off to college, or how can we receive them, right? How can we be that type of parish in a college setting that these young people know they're welcome and can be engaged and can continue their exploration and faith journey. And so I want to start with a story. I grew up United Church of Christ, and I think the best thing that my church did to help me, I also went to Dartmouth, to help to prepare me to continue my faith growing up, was two things. One, it had an active adult education program. And so I had the witness of my parents continuing their education and just loving it. You know, we were near Chicago, so they got professors from Chicago Theological Seminary to come on out. But just that example that sent a clear message that this is a lifelong faith. And it was not something someone graduated out of. That was really important looking back, because my mom was so enthused when she'd learn about, the Old Testament writers or things like that. The other thing was we had a good youth group, but it wasn't just that it was a youth group. Our minister did a couple things that were really, really important. One was he taught us the difference between like a church, a sect, and a cult, because back in my day, the Moonies and the Hare Krishnas were really big. And so he really was he was teaching us life skills and preparing us to launch no matter what we were launching. And, we went and visited the Moonies. We went and visited the Hare Krishnas. And so he was really helping us all along start to discuss issues that would be important to us once we left the nest. Another thing he did was we went on a college tour. And so we visited kids who had been in the youth group who are now in college, in Illinois and Indiana. And that was really cool because, again, it wasn't just about like, oh, maybe I want to go to Valparaiso. That was one place we went. But it was like, wow, the church stays connected to its young people. And the church wants us to know how to navigate this. And so without even saying it, I sense that, oh, this is something I can still be involved in. And my church wants to help me be involved in. And my church is as interested in my life as I grow up. Those were huge things that I can't stress enough if you're a sending church or if you have young people. And even if you don't have a youth group, just how are you having those conversations and how are you modeling as a parish that, this is a lifelong journey and that there are things that help you continue to explore the meaning of life. So I just wanted to start by saying, there's a lot of different examples. I'm coming from it, growing up UCC. So it's not just about how do we find out where our young person is going to college and then see what the Episcopal parish is in that town and then call that priest. Because if you don't have these other relationships already happening, it's not going to feel real to those students. But I also want to let Guy talk a little bit about, because I see there's a lot of people on this call, what's it like to be a parish in a college town that, what are the important principles so that the students realize this is a relevant activity for them and it's worthy to keep pursuing. So I gave just a little tee up around, what was important for me. I won't talk about my college experience because I ended up at Edgerton House. I'll let Guy talk about that now.
Thanks, Nancy, and thanks for inviting me to be part of this. It's fun to be with all of you. So I get the joy of wearing the college ministry hat some of the time and then the parish hat some of the time. And I'm really excited to talk about the parish piece. And I'm going to begin by telling a story against myself. So when I first arrived 15 years ago at St. Thomas, I noticed that every single week, even if there were no students in the church, someone would stand up and say, welcome all undergraduate students, and I want to invite you to our supper this Wednesday, or Theology on Tap, or whatever it was. And as a kind of wet behind the ears priest, I'm like, why are we talking to nobody? Just seems really boring for everyone who's here. And so I spoke to our senior warden and she's like, well, Guy, it's not just about the students. It's also about the parish. And part of the kind of wisdom I want to hand on is the wisdom of this senior warden, Judith Esme, who was a great force for good in our community. And she helped me see that our ministry to students wasn't just about making sure that there were, good things to be eating and good things to be talking about on a Wednesday night or on a Monday night, but also to actually see the synergy between the parish and student ministry. And I think for those of you who may be in contexts where there aren't already flourishing campus ministry programs and you're just about to go into a parish where maybe there's a desire for campus ministry, but that maybe hasn't been a big tradition, or maybe there's been a tradition that hasn't been that big. I encourage you to think about using your community and drawing your community in to support you in the work of welcoming college students and just integrating that into the parish. Since 15 years ago, we now actually generally have students in the building when we ask them to come to our events later that week, which is kind of exciting. And we, generally speaking, have become, over the last 3 years in particular, over the pandemic, we've moved from having a lot of events at Edgerton House, our student center, to having less events and just being much more intentional. So part of the other piece of wisdom I want to share is we've really winnowed what we do and become really super fixated on what is it, why are we here? What is our purpose? What gives you meaning? You know, why do you troop up to church each week? And, you know, why do you go to your job? You know, what is it that you do? What drives you? What's your passion? And my students have kind of come around by basically being asked challenging questions and discovering that church actually is, as Nancy was saying earlier, church is one of the few places you can actually talk about all the deep stuff these days. So
can you talk about the student who like by the end of the conversation was like, wow, I'm really glad I came, who was not very into it to begin with?
Sure. So one of our programs, we really had 3 programs before the pandemic, and we rolled them all into one program during the pandemic for all sorts of good reasons. And this program, we force students to read a book. And when I say force students, no one can force an undergraduate to do anything. So we make the book available to them, we give it to them, and we make it super easy for them not to have read it and still discuss it. And we were reading this quite challenging book for our Dartmouth students called, some of you may have even heard of it, The Cloud of Unknowing. Great text of medieval spirituality. And one of these students was coming from a very evangelical, very conservative background. That's very typical for us in our campus ministry. And she was every single week, you know, headbutting this book. And we just did what we do. We talked about the book. We ate together and we prayed compline together. And at the very end of the term, we had a special meal to celebrate the term. And this student who had really loathed the book, as far as I could tell, the entire term, came up to me and said, you know, I think I totally learned a lot this term. And now I'm looking at the world in a different way. So for me, that was one of the high points of, you know, years of ministry, because often students aren't that upfront about where they've had change. But that was a great reminder that, you know, sometimes asking people to think about things they wouldn't normally think about is actually quite good. And a lot of what we do at the Edge and at the parish is we make a space to do what Nancy was talking about, to be a place where the questions are encouraged. I love this. I love Rowan Williams' description of the church. You know, what is the church? The church is the community that hands down the questions. And if you're in campus ministry, college ministry, parish ministry, you know, you're about asking the questions, and you're not about answering them, but you're about, you know, for students, often forcing them to actually think about answers that maybe they haven't thought about before, and challenging them to go a little deeper.
Right. And I really appreciate that, Guy, because, you know, as the chaplain, I oversee all the campus ministries, and each campus ministry does things a little bit differently. So there's not one right way. But I love, Guy, how you said, like, you know, you're actually winnowing it down. Like you're trusting your gut enough and your experience and your relationship with the students to know, you know, let's go deeper. So it's not always you have to do more. I know some campus ministries, it's really important for them, that campus minister, to be, you know, having coffee with the students, building that relationship, being that adult that cares, that checks in on them. That matters a lot to our young people. But also, there are some that, you know, train up a few student leaders who can be that peer-to-peer outreach, which is, I'm sure it's true at every college or university, but is a really big thing I'm noticing here at Dartmouth, that that students really appreciate having generations, right? Because you're hanging out with kids your own age, but it's nice to go to church and see little kids or see families or see grandparent age. But it's not just to see them, but it's to engage them. And so like the Lutheran church where I served, what was great about it is, all the parishioners were very friendly with students after the service, and really genuinely appeared. It's not, this can't happen if it's just the priest. Like, I ended up going to Edgerton House. I had done like this circuit of all these different campus ministries when I was a student. And then I was working for the Career and Employment Services, and there was a woman there by the name of Vogele, and she happened to be a St. Thomas parishioner. But she was just listening to me, taking an interest in me. And I was kind of disgruntled where I was. And she's like, you should come to the Edge. And I was like, well, what's that? Right? So that the ability to, if any of your parishioners work at the college, to be engaging with students and to not be afraid to be listening and to be offering. Because I think students really are searching and providing, providing a deep and rich engagement, I think is really important to students. Yes, Melinda.
I'm sorry, I may have missed this. Just a logistical question. What is Edgerton House? You've said it a few times.
Yeah. Edgerton House is the Episcopal student ministry connected to St. Thomas Episcopal Church, located about 2 blocks from Dartmouth College. And Guy is the rector and the chaplain for that ministry. Sorry about that.
No, that's okay.
Yeah,
What,
it's a great question.
Guy,
if I can just, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, what exactly do you do with the college students, just logistically?
Sure. So in 2008, we did some renovations in Edgerton House. Before that, it had largely been a student building that was used once a week, and that was about it. Which when you're paying for an entire building for 90 minutes of operations a week is not a great model. So in 2008 we changed it. The parish made a significant investment, and now since 2008 we have students who are actually also in residence there, as well as the programming during the week, and as well as being a 24/7 safe space where people can go and pray, go and cook, go and study. Enjoy the Wi-Fi or just read a book that you can't get somewhere else. So the building is there for all students, but the residents who are there are living in what we call an intentional community based along the Rule of St. Benedict. It's super simplified Rule of St. Benedict. For those of you who are familiar with the Rule of St. Benedict, imagine you're an undergraduate age 18 with a massive course load, and imagine you're a chaplain trying to work out how can they follow the Rule of Benedict. Basically, we boil down most of the rule to some shared care of the common life and the building, but also participation in our regular Wednesday supper, study, prayer sessions. So to live at the Edge, it's mandatory that you actually do the reading, and that's one of the ways we ensure that we have at least some students who've done the reading for what we're doing every week. And then if you don't live at the Edge, that's totally optional. But if you do live at the Edge, you have to follow through on your chores, you have to follow through on being an ambassador of the campus ministry, and you have to be following what we call a covenant, where you agree to certain behavioral standards. So we kind of set a slightly high bar for the people living at the Edge. And then we do all the things that everyone else does off-site and on-site to help, other students who are, going through whatever they're going through. And that's our base of operations. But of course, we also have a parish church where many of our students worship. At the moment, we are just about to search for a curate for the summer. So one of the reasons I was so thrilled to be invited here is that I'm very happy to say we're looking for a curate. And one of our Edgerton students is going to be on the search team. So one of the benefits of coming from working in a parish where there's a long history of partnership between the college and the parish is that it's in our DNA that everything we do is student-centered. So, you know, the parish supports the Edge in so many ways, which are beyond the financial. And in return, we want to make sure the students are at the table when we search for our next full-time clergy person. I'll tell you another little story about the Edge. Last night we had our supper, and we arrived. Every student takes turns to cook supper once a week, which is basically a genius invention of the chaplain, so that the chaplain doesn't have to cook every week, but then they get the feeling of, you know, different meals every week, and the food is brilliant when it's a different student every week. So that's a hot tip, is get the students to do the cooking and don't have the same person do it every week. But last night we trooped up, and what did we find? We found 2 huge packs of cookies that had been dropped off by a parishioner for the students for their supper. And that kind of random act of kindness happens all the time, and really just reflects the community sense of, okay, we care about what happens at the Edge. One last sort of, if you're looking at it from the parish angle, a few years ago, we revised our bylaws. So we always have a Dartmouth student sitting on the vestry. It's a 1-year seat, and that really forces the parish to pay attention to campus ministry. And it also gives us this real benefit of student wisdom at the table. And I don't know about your vestry, but the average age of our vestry isn't always in, you know, the 18 to 20 bracket. And this really guarantees that we've got a good kind of multi-generational community there. Back to you, Nancy.
So in terms of programming, you have a Wednesday night dinner with a book discussion.
Yeah, that's
Is there any other programming at this point?
Yeah. So we used to have Mondays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. And when I was describing the winnowing, that's what we did. We used to have 3 events which were lightly attended. And now we have 1 event where our entire building is full of students. And so over the 15 years, we've gone from a kind of, I don't want to say a scattergun approach, but sort of multiple portals to a place where we really invest heavily in doing one thing really well. And of course, we also do worship at various points in the week to outside of the student center, and we have students regularly come to worship on Sundays and other parts of the week. And then there's the ministry of the one-to-one quiet ministry of counseling and walking alongside students and answering their questions. And I don't know about Nancy, but I seem to be spending more time talking to parents these days than I ever was 15 years ago. So that's also a piece of the puzzle, being somebody on site who can support the kids when their parents are worried about how they're doing. And that's part of the package these days.
Mm. Well, and also I wanted to talk a little bit about logistics, because one of the things, and it'll be different, one of the things we do through the Tucker Center is incoming students over the summer have to fill out a whole bunch of surveys, right, as part of coming to college. And one of the optional surveys is to fill out a religious heritage survey. So they don't have to do it, but many, many do. And so they give us what their religious heritage is, and if they want to find out information about any of our student religious groups. And then what I can do is I can share that information with the particular group. And so if you are a parish in a college town, I would reach out to the chaplain's office and say, is there a mechanism for us to know about Episcopal students, or that students might be interested in us reaching out to them? And I'm sure each chaplaincy has a way of doing that. Ours is pretty systematic. So so that would really behoove you too, because then what Guy and his colleagues do is they reach out to these students. They have students write to students, or they write to students before they get to campus and say, hey, we're having this barbecue the first week, or we're having an open house at the Tucker Center, come and visit us, or we have a student activities fair. So all of our groups have a table. And so all the first year students go around and learn about, the outdoor programs groups or the singing groups or whatever. And we're in that mixed. And so knowing how you can get the word out about your ministry and how they do that at your college nearby, I think that's really important to know that. So you can take advantage of whatever supports there are.
Now, most colleges don't have chaplains.
Well, I think it would, like, I know in South Hadley, I know at Smith they do, I know, so I think just seeing if there is that or student activities or something, if there are student groups, right? And, it's just worth knowing how that works.
Yeah. Student activities would probably be a good portal.
I know a couple of the colleges around here that are I'm in Maine, so some of the like little Ivies like Bowdoin and Colby have a position that's called something like Dean of Spiritual Life, or and so it's maybe not a Christian chaplain, but they are sort of a person that is in charge of that purview for whatever it may be for that school.
Right, and I would have someone from your parish, if not the priest, reach out to that person and learn best ways of, getting to know students and interacting with them.
The other piece I would throw out.
Yeah, go ahead, guys, sorry.
I'm just going to say, the other piece to throw out is that I think most of these colleges have staff and have faculty. And I think that's also something to think about pastorally if you're in a parish, for so many reasons. But actually nurturing good relationships with faculty and staff can often take you to the students, because if you actually know faculty and staff, the chances are that you know them because you have some interest in common, and then they know you. And we have some really great faculty in our parish, and they tend to be the people who help draw people towards us. And then they also are the kind of people you can ask to do adult ed for you. And then they're the kind of people who draw their students to the parish. So one piece you talked about at the beginning, Nancy, that I think is really worth underlining is the way, the adult ed piece within a parish can really also be a really good synergy with college. And one of the ways we do that at St. Thomas and the Edge is by, sharing the kind of good stuff that we're studying at the Edge with the parish, and then also, inviting people to speak who we think are going to be interesting for both our parishioners and our students. And the more you do that, the more you create inroads into the college.
Right, and trying to figure out ways that can be advertised on campus, whether that be word of mouth, through the faculty member who's going to be speaking to say, hey, I'm speaking at this place, but at church, why don't you come? Or if there's ways you can put up posters in the student union or things like that. I also can't emphasize enough food, like whether you take a student out to lunch, or whether you take them to have coffee, or whether you have a weekly meal, that really appeals to students. We find at Tucker, if you don't do a meal, no one comes. If you don't have the relationship.
Food is good, but food with purpose would be the piece I would say. We did food for a long time, and when we added the purpose, that just kind of took off.
Do you have any wisdom, either of you, on for parishes keeping in touch or ways to support their kids who have flown off to college in various directions?
I mean, I can't stress enough how important it is to have real relationships with young people well before they graduate. That if the parish isn't genuinely interested in young people as human beings, just as they are interested in other parishioners, not because they'll be an acolyte or not because they'll do a cleanup, but like really getting to know these students and care for them and come alongside them. That's got to be there so that when you get to college and the young person has questions, they have that relationship back home that they can reach out to, or that person from the parish can always be checking in and saying, hey, how's it going? Tell me something new, like just to stay in that touch maybe even send a care package. That's always really big. I know at St. Matthew's, where I was with Lene, whenever students came home from college, one of the things a lot of our young people did was sing. And so the choir was always welcoming them. Hey, sing it at Christmas, right? And it was really fun for those students to be doing that, because it was kind of like this camaraderie that they had a place to come back to.
We had 5 young adults who were there at Christmas, some of them college students, some of them a little older, and they sang at the 11 o'clock service for Christmas Eve.
Right. And so knowing them enough to know, oh yeah, hey, jump on in, right? Like it's this like joyful reunion. Yeah. Or when someone's home to say, hey, you want to go get coffee? I'd love to hear how school's going. I think that genuine interest. Yes, Madison.
Hi there. I was just had a question about, because you're saying, as a chaplain, there's, several other kinds of religions happening on campus, which is great. I wonder if you guys ever do like interfaith, multi-faith events or programming, and how those work out.
So I think Guy will agree with me on this. I am all for interfaith. I think we need more interfaith. I think we need to learn to get to know people from other worldviews, and to learn about those worldviews, and to therefore grow in our appreciation of those worldviews. However, I personally don't think that should happen instead of an Episcopal campus ministry, because I firmly believe that the Episcopal Church has something uniquely to offer our young people. And if we're not grounding them in that, then how are they engaging across difference if we're not giving them that? Like, that's what we have. And I feel like we should be unapologetic about that. But that's just taking off my college chaplain hat and putting on my Episcopal priest hat, because I see all too often like a bunch of Protestant churches trying to have a Protestant ministry, and it's not forming students to be involved in a church, right? However they decide to do that, right? It's not like I want people to be Episcopalians, but I do think that you end up somewhere in community, growing in your faith and coming alongside others who are wanting to do that same thing. And it doesn't happen in a discussion circle. It happens without it also being grounded somewhere. And I feel like helping our students be grounded so that when they do have that interfaith discussion, they're coming from a place of groundedness. But Guy, you can jump in whatever you think.
I really agree with Nancy. I also think it's a really brilliant and actually very deep question, because for most of us, I suspect we'll find ourselves ministering to people who aren't Episcopalians if we're in this work. And that's really good, and that's what we want. And most of the people I minister with in the college ministry are not Episcopalians. And so on the one hand, I totally agree with Nancy that we should be doing what we do, which we should, and really should be digging into our tradition and exploring it and showing people that it's more complicated and more nuanced and more mysterious than they realize. At the same time, we need to be able to have these conversations across difference, where we respect difference and acknowledge it. And I sort of sometimes think that I'm doing interfaith stuff every single time I talk to a student, because if I'm talking to my Episcopalian, I've got, somebody who believes something exactly diametrically opposed to her or him, 2 feet behind me as I'm talking, or around the same table. So it's complicated, but I totally 300% behind Nancy. We have to be doing Episcopal campus ministry as something that we believe in, that has something to do with our own faith. At the same time, we do it in an Episcopal way, which is to be generous and hospitable and to be welcoming of all people. The other piece I would throw out there is if you're trying to make stronger connections on the campus, I think it works really well to do the kind of interfaith piece in the parish. And we've historically invited lots of the local Jewish and Muslim and other faith leaders to talk to us as part of our adult ed. And that's a really great way of doing a bit of that interfaith piece in the parish, whilst also, nurturing and creating community to sort of, go deeper into the college.
How many of you here are not from Episcopal parishes? Okay, I just wanted to make sure because we've often had people.
Well,
Suzanne,
right.
what?
And
are
I
you
wanted to
coming
say,
from?
can I just add something? Like if you are UCC, be UCC, right? I mean, I'm not dissing any other denomination or anything like that, but like you have whatever your affiliation is, that's a unique thing you have to offer. And you don't want to water it down. You want to really offer that. And again, like I said, you're going to be encountering all sorts of students and other people, but that's no one else can give that. So yes, Suzanne.
Oh, I wanted to ask, along those lines, obviously how you're connecting with students when they arrive on campus. My daughter is a senior at Virginia Tech. So one of the things and I've been a member of the Virginia Tech parents Facebook group since she arrived on campus. So I'm very aware that lots of students arrive on campus with kind of a vague idea that they might connect, but I'm wondering how they're getting in, if any of you have some creative ideas for how you're making that initial invitation to come find the Episcopal Church that's only 2 blocks away.
Well, it's a two-way street, right? Because I think as a parish priest who has a young person going somewhere else, I always looked and saw like, okay, is there an Episcopal parish near the University of College? And I would call that parish and try to talk to the priest to say, what are you offering? So I can let the student know, hey, if this is something that interests you, this is what's happening at this parish, and this is this person, and I just do the groundwork for them, right? But that's like the sending part. Guy, do you have thoughts on the?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tricky one, and it sort of depends on the culture of the college as much as anything. And I think one thing I wanted to just note is that every college has a different culture and every parish has a different culture, and you just need to find the kind of connection between those two. And some colleges do, like Dartmouth does this great student activities fair, and that's just a basic, I'm sure every college does some variant of that. So if you can find the place where everyone is milling around shopping for new whatever it is, new Frisbee club, and if you can just be there, show up at those places where people want you to be there and are open to newness. And I think that's a good way to connect. There's a lot of pressure on students to read 10,000 emails coming from everywhere, every week, every millisecond, I should say. I'm in favor of, real world connections wherever you can, just showing up, just being a presence, doing something. Having a gimmick, every student activities fair, we try and do something a little different and a little new, so it's fresh, whatever it is. It doesn't matter what it is, just, it gives people an excuse to kind of stop at your table and see what you're up to.
Right, and you can look on the college's website and see, do they have a chaplaincy? Do they have religious and spiritual life? What do they do? Is there a contact person? And also what Guy said earlier, do you have faculty and staff in your parish? Pick their brains, ask what they think, because it is a network, right? It's a web, and you really do have to network.
What kind of gimmicks have you done, Guy?
Root beer floats.
Yeah, root beer floats was good. We had a year when we had all these koozies and gave out lots of root beer, and We've done lots of cookies, we've done stickers, we've done magnets, we've done books. That was actually our most, expensive sort of dangerous thing, actually giving out real books. But that actually was okay. We had lots of little cards, little pretty cards with various, fun things, fun texts and pictures on them. It doesn't have to be expensive is one of the things I would say. You can do something quite inexpensively with a little bit of thought. We've done a lot of t-shirts for our own students. We tend not to give those out to everyone, but that just kind of ramps up a sense of identity.
I think you also at that fair say, hey, come to Wednesday night dinner. Like you give them a way to get engaged right away.
Right.
And you have students there who are saying, hey, I'm Tom, come and I'm there every Wednesday.
Right. I would stress the idea of invitation. So if you can invite people to something, your students, that isn't just you, like, meeting one-on-one with this adult they've never met who may be looking somewhat intimidating, who knows? I mean, that's just me, but I'm sure you wouldn't be intimidating. But, to be able to say, okay, there's this other thing that's going on that's just for students, I think that's a really good thing to be able to do.
Yeah, Doug, go ahead.
Doug.
Yeah, well, I'm grateful for all the really great ideas you all have thrown out there. So I serve as the Bishop of Western Massachusetts, and we've got 32 college campuses within our diocese, and no on-site chaplains. We have, just like you have, we've got parishes that are deeply connected, and others that there's no contact at all. But the question I have has to do with mental health in terms of colleges, and so I get invited to speak at a lot of those colleges, and I always ask the chaplain, whether they're Episcopal or whoever the chaplain is, to say, what should I speak about? And invariably they say, speak about hope. Our students really need hope. And a really sad example of that is WPI, Worcester Poly Institute, a really good school. Last year, in a 4-month period, they had 7 students who died by suicide. And so that's a reality in terms of people needing hope. And so I'm wondering if there's any contact that can be made with mental health professionals at the college. When that happened at Worcester, we've got, city of Worcester's pretty big, right? So we've got 5 Episcopal churches in Worcester, and myself and all the directors of those churches wrote to the president and said, we're here. Can we be helpful in some way? And he sent a notice back to us saying, yeah, we would love that, but no kind of practical connection. And so, do you have any advice about?
In my opinion, churches have to be there has to be a relationship with students. We had a meeting, our campus ministers, with some mental health professionals and the head of our student health services, and he said being connected is being protected, right? And so we, those 5 parishes, if they can find ways to connect with students on an ongoing basis, I do want to say, Guy and that ministry, over the years realized, okay, we need to winnow this down. We need to get really specific, whatever. But other ministries, like we have a UCC church, and yeah, they don't have this core group like Edgerton House, but they still have a ministry to the college, okay? And their ministry to the college is on Thanksgiving. They always have a Thanksgiving dinner for the international students. On Christmas, whether you're Muslim, Jewish, whatever, if you're an international student, there's a big dinner, and 70 to 100 students go to that, right? So that's their shtick, right? And if students need a place to meet because we have such a meeting space issue here, they're always open to so they're not converting anybody to the United Church of Christ, but they're providing that belonging right? Which is protective. And they're sending a message that we care about you. And I think we need to be really creative about that. Yeah, go ahead, guys.
Yeah, can I just speak to I think the mental health piece is a really important question. And one of the things that we've really discovered over the pandemic was that we needed to make our conversation deeper, more intentional, and more purposeful. So when I talk about winnowing, what I really am talking about is deepening. We are an extremely superficial culture. Nowhere is that more true than a college in many ways. And so one of the things that we changed during the pandemic is every single time we meet around the table, we do a check-in. Before the pandemic, the check-in used to be, what elf would you be from the Lord of Rings? Or, what's your favorite Marvel character? Or whatever pop thing it was. And, it was always very fun. And we would spend about half an hour talking about pop trivia. We don't do that anymore. That's gone. Every single Wednesday, the first question we ask is it's always your name, your major, and then we ask a very intentional mental health question that isn't a mental health question, it's a theological question. And it's the same question every week, but we frame it differently. And it's basically what you just said, Doug. Often we'll ask them, what sparks your joy? What are you thankful for this week? Or as we asked last night, what gives you hope? And the reason we do that is we're not mental health professionals, but we do know, having listened to talks by them forever and a day, that we need our students to be vulnerable and open. And last night, one of our students, who is very close to the edge of being very close to the edge of a not good place, had basically not answered those questions for the last 3 weeks in a row, except to say she took her classes this week. Last night, she told the entire table about the mental health help she was getting, the drugs she was now on, and how she's now feeling a lot better. And that was because we asked her, what gives you hope? And the only thing I have to say that's any help, I hope, is, get them talking about the things that matter. And I know as an Episcopalian that we're really good at talking about the stuff that doesn't matter. We're very good at, staying up here, being polite and lovely and friendly and warm and jolly. And let's not talk about anything dark, because that might be a bit scary. But actually, college ministry is all about, not in an inquisitorial way, but in an open way that can be positive, starting those conversations. And if you keep doing those enough, you're going to go deep. And you may not go deep in the group every week, but you'll go deep one-on-one. And I think that's one of the ways we can make a difference. Dartmouth had its own very, very sad, very similar stories, very recent history too. And I think we're all terribly, really focused on helping our students name things to be grateful for. It's so traumatic and it's so tragic when they can't. But at least when they can't, we know that then we need to follow up with them and keep an eye on them and just be there for them and just make them know that they're loved and we're here for them and they don't need to go through stuff alone.
And I think just doing that check-in allows students to minister to one another with their honesty and their vulnerability, and lets students who might be in a tough space hear that and know they're not alone too.
To be in relationship and as you said, to be in deep relationship is what's so important. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, we were all scarred and traumatized by COVID. Can you imagine being, having to face that as a young person? It just blows my mind.
It's one thing
Right,
to have 2 years out of my 16-year-old life and 2 years out of your 18-year-old life. It's a big difference. Yeah.
Yeah, without any of our coping skills, right?
Yeah.
Any other thoughts or questions that people have or want to share ideas? Or
Suzanne?
Catherine, what's your perspective? Because you're a what did you say you were? Like a student intern or a
Yeah, I'm part of the Episcopal Service Corps, but I don't want to jump ahead if Suzanne has a question.
So I just want to mention, I chaired the Diocese of Massachusetts committee, co-chaired with one of my millennial cohorts, working with adults in their 20s and 30s. And one of the things that, my colleagues, on that committee shared with me was how often they find themselves in places, they move all the time, and they often get invited to serve on vestry just as they're moving away. We have a habit in the Episcopal Church to give people a couple of years to settle in before we ask them to do anything. And one of the things I learned from that group of people was, but that's a mistake, because then we never invite them in. So I'm wondering, especially for my younger colleagues here who maybe had that experience of being invited to participate, how soon did it happen, and what for you is kind of the sweet spot for being invited to come in and go deeper, as it were?
I don't want to hog the limelight, but I was invited in when I was 18 to be on the vestry myself. And I've just invited a first-year undergraduate who had just got elected to our vestry. And we also have a first year on our search team for our curate. So I'm all in. Get them early.
How long had they been members of the church before you invited them?
Milliseconds.
Yeah.
Yeah. But they're worshiping every single week. I mean, when I say milliseconds, I mean, I honestly mean about one term. So they came in the fall. We got a bunch of students who are just right in full throttle, doing everything, campus ministry and the parish. And that's for us really quite rare and precious. We often see students either at the parish or at campus ministry, but I've got a bunch right now who are doing both, which is just terrific. But I'd also throw out the idea that, don't be, if you're trying to do something for students in a student space and you've got them coming to your 8 o'clock or your 10 o'clock or whatever it is, don't be mad that they're not going to your student thing if they're going to the liturgy. That's terrific. That's just great. And get them onto being a Eucharistic minister or an acolyte or whatever it is on outreach, or, it's, but invite them in early. It's great.
Yeah, or to read.
I grew up in a culture where families moved every 18 months. So if you were going to get to know people, you had to do it right away. And 3 to 6 months is about as long as you can wait. And as a young person, I moved a lot as well. So that would be my reflection on that. I've got a 23-year-old who just moved to Anchorage, Alaska. He's going to move around a while, I suspect. So, Catherine, what do you think of all these old fogies talking about kids?
Well, I was, brought into the Episcopal Church through someone my age, but also through my college chaplain. So, I got it through people of multiple ages. But I really liked, Guy, what you said about, if you have students who are coming to worship, that is wonderful as well, even if that's kind of where their engagement stops. I'm currently in my role doing campus ministry through two separate parishes, and that's there are several students who are engaged in the worship and aren't coming to events, but like they're really engaged in the worship, and that's great too. But I think the other piece that raises for me, maybe coming from my own experience, was that it took me at least a solid year to decide that I really wanted to become an Episcopalian, because not coming from that background. And I think that's something as well that I'm seeing in my current role now, is that when college students are sort of figuring out for themselves and deciding for themselves, that takes time, and that may not sort of immediately look like someone being engaged every week or coming to everything, but kind of there are some times and they're not, and that has as much to do with their own sort of decision making process as it does with busy schedules as well.
And I also want to stress that being unapologetically Episcopalian doesn't mean you don't try to convince anybody of anything, right? Like, you just want to engage, and you just want to help them engage. I mean, the worst thing is for students to feel like they're being pressured to accept something. Like, you're just trying to engage with them, and that you genuinely want to be in relationship with them. Because there are other Christian groups on campuses that are trying to do that very thing. Then I have to come in as college chaplain and clean up the mess. Any other thoughts or questions or ideas that, we didn't highlight, but you're doing or you'd like to do?
Yes, some of our parishes that are near college campuses, something that's worked for them is, of course, they invite people to worship, but they also invite people to serve at the food pantry, things like that. And in this generation where a lot of folks have not been raised in a church, they don't necessarily get the whole worship love of God, but they get love of neighbor. And so their entryway into community is through serving at the food pantry. And so we've had several churches that have been successful with that. And sometimes that translates into those folks coming into the faith community as a worshiping community. And sometimes it doesn't, but it gives them a place to be connected. It gives them a purpose, in terms of being connected to those who are in need. And that unto itself seems to be a good connection to folks.
Right, and I think as people feel comfortable in that food pantry setting, being in a relationship with those students and sharing why they do what they do, right? Why is it important for them to be of service to those who have food insecurity? Again, it's having those deeper conversations to really connect with students, because students are really learning about themselves and what's important to them and what do they believe, and to not shy away from having those deeper conversations. As Guy said, it's the depth that makes the difference.
Has anyone here connected with any of the service fraternities and sororities to help to build those service hours? My daughter also joined a service sorority, so I became aware that a lot of fraternities and sororities have a requirement to do so many hours. I'm wondering if anybody's ever made a connection with a particular group that has to do that kind of service and to invite people and to do joint projects together that might offer that opportunity for relationship building.
That's a really interesting idea.
I just speaking about that, a couple of years ago, I guess it was right before the pandemic. We don't have a priest right now, So it does it makes some outreach a little more difficult, just because there's not like one designated staff person that's kind of thinking about this. But at that time, a few years ago, it just so happened that our priest did meet some folks that were one in a sorority and one in a fraternity. And he actually had created plans to build a miniature food pantry with the fraternity, and to have right outside our doors. And then the pandemic hit, of course, and then all of the, everybody kind of scattered, and then those people graduate, and then those connections are lost. But that was really exciting to me, thinking about that. I was like, oh, cool. What if we did have this relationship, and you could kind of then, the president of that fraternity could kind of pass on this, hey, there's a guy who's always looking for service, So it's a great idea, and I think it could work, but obviously our timing was bad. But
I would just really want to encourage anything you do to make sure it's connected to your core mission.
Mhm.
I really think that, faith without works is dead, right? And so I totally agree that is a way to meet students. And I remember when I was doing clinical pastoral education, when I was in seminary, I remember the head chaplain, he wasn't the one doing our unit, but he came and talked to us, and he said, when you go into a room, don't be the volunteer, right? There's candy stripers for that. And when you go into a room, don't be the nurse, there's nurses for that. No one else going to that room can be the chaplain. And so if you don't try to be the chaplain, it's never going to happen. Now, you'll go into a room and people really don't want you to be the chaplain. Fine, chit chat with them. Talk about hunting if the guy's a hunter, but don't not offer that, because no one else is going to offer it. And so I think it's a balance between no one else is going to offer them, this depth of exploration of meaning and purpose. And I'm not saying that can't happen through a food pantry, but just know that what is that unique thing that no one else is going to offer them? And how do you do that through these various means, right? How do you do that through, inviting people to be part of a food pantry, or inviting them to worship, or whatever your activity is? It's and if that student just really wants to be of service, right, and isn't interested so much in the exploration of faith, great, meet them there. But I just don't want us not to offer what we uniquely have to offer. And how we offer it, I think, depends on the situation. And it might be through a food pantry. It might be through engaging the Greek system, but just don't lose what we have to offer that no one else does.
Nancy, in a really, really strange way, you've framed the experience I had as a parish priest in a college town in New Hampshire, where the college was a profoundly secular place. And there had it had been decades since there were college students connected to the parish. The parish was its own saga, but every fall and every spring for the years I was there, I put out my card table and I put on my collar, and I found as many rainbow flags as I could, and was just a Christian who was an ordained woman who believed in the dignity of every human being, and that never turned into
much of anything in terms of activities or programming or people coming to church. But I have to have confidence that just that physical witness of going, isn't that interesting? May have planted some seeds, even in the people who only sort of stared, as opposed to engaging in conversation. I think that the clergy in New Hampshire is fresh from considering radical non-outcome based hope, and I think that that's that's showing up with sort of no expectations that a thriving college ministry is gonna take root, but just having sort of shown up and said, hey, I love Jesus and Jesus loves you, and someone in a who looks like me is someone who is a leader in my faith tradition, and that was a revealing thing for people who were coming either from no religious background at all or a Roman Catholic background. The other
or evangelical
really was fruitful is that the Catholic diocese did support a lay woman as their campus ministry presence, and she would invite me to participate with her on Ash Wednesday on absolutely equal footing, and that was a reminder that there were certainly kids who again Roman Catholics who needed to get their ashes on Wednesday, and if they were going to get their ashes on campus on that Wednesday, their choices were a Roman Catholic laywoman or a woman Episcopal priest, and they showed up. And that I think is in line with what you're saying about be true to who you are, and that integrity is itself a really important message to share.
Yeah, it's a witness. Anybody else? We have a few more minutes, but thank you, Kelly, for that.
I put a question in the chat about outreach that people are doing during midterms and finals, because that is that stress time for students. That's what maybe when they're looking for some hope, they're looking for prayers, they're looking for support. So I was curious what other folks are doing.
I would say copy what so many college campuses, student mental health are doing with sort of bringing in therapy pets. Invite your parishioners who have golden retrievers to be in the parish hall, and just come and play with the dog during exams. It's just surely the same people who bring their pets to St. Francis Day might bring them and just come and play with the puppy,
or walk on campus. And if any kids like, oh, say you want to pet them,
Yeah.
But again, I think it's trying to figure out ways to be in relationship across the term, so that when there is midterms, when you reach out, it feels authentic, and you have gotten to know some of these students, and you can plan something with them.
At Virginia Tech, the local moms make grilled cheese sandwiches for all comers at the library.
We've talked a lot about food, and I know that in colleges today, there are often kids who don't have enough to eat. And I know of several colleges who now have food pantries
Mhm.
because of that. Has anybody run into that or connected through that? Or I don't know, just throwing it out there.
I mean, we have a small food pantry attached to the back of our building, and things get taken out of. I mean, people just kind of put in what they can, and other people take it. And so, I don't see people taking it, so it's very like anonymous and outside of our doors. But things get taken out of it. So I have to assume. We're in a pretty rural area and we're right on campus at UConn. So like, I would think that there would be some students that would be taking advantage of it. But like a formal, like somebody coming and like asking for help and kind of needing in that way, I don't know of it at our parish, at least.
I wonder
But that's
if that
another
would
thing
be
if
a,
you-
go Nancy.
One thing you could do is, if that's a ministry that a parish is interested in making sure no student is hungry, that you could make that known. You could see through a parishioner who's on staff or faculty, what office would I reach out to let them know that if any student is hungry, we will provide food, or and it doesn't have to be that they have to come to us. We will deliver it to that dean or whatever. Like if you feel called to that type of ministry, then again, work with your parishioners who might be on staff at the institution or faculty to know who would be the best person to reach out to let them know of that. And maybe even bring in a few samples so they can see, oh, it's not bad.
We don't know about many students who are actually hungry, but one thing I would say is our students are always complaining about college food. So, offering a home-cooked meal is our deal. That's part of our deal, I should say. And it's this, we encourage our students to cook the simplest food possible. And over the years, we've actually worked really hard to go from kind of gourmet 3-course meals to super simple. And it seems that the quality of community has just got even better as the food has got simpler. So just to throw that out there as well, simple home cooked food is a good thing.
Anybody else? We have Sam here, who is our speaker for next month, and I'll let her give a little pitch as to what she's going to be talking about.
So I'll be talking about taking Vacation Bible School away from the church itself and doing it in some different locations. We've used some parks, we've used a farm, we've used different areas, and to use the place to its full advantage as far as what your topic for that day is. It's very, I don't want to say loosey-goosey, but families are very busy, and we no longer have the large number of volunteers to have an on-site Vacation Bible School. And so we require parents to come with their children, but they don't have to come every single day of the week that we offer it. They can come one day if they want. So each day has to be a standalone, but it's been very successful. And we, of course, had to stop during the pandemic. During the pandemic, I did online Vacation Bible School, which was a real experience. But last summer, we actually did, we again did our vacation Bible school on the road. And, you know, not everybody can participate, which makes me sad, but at the same time, it does give us an opportunity to offer something for those people who are able to take advantage of it. So we'll be talking about how we did it and what some of the topics were that we talked about and some of the locations that we used to enhance those lessons.
Thank you. So it's the same sign up you did for this month for the rest of the year. So if you want to look at some of the other topics we've got coming up, we'd love to have you spread the word. And I'm really glad everybody came. And
Yeah, thank you,
especially
everybody. It was a
Nancy
nice
and Guy, thank
conversation.
you so much.
Thank you.
Take good care, everybody.
Nice to see you all. Thank you.
Thanks, Lene.